Let us not forget everything that happens. It's by the will of Allah. Holy will. It's time to unite and stand, and we will be the best amongst men. It's not time to be extreme or duty unthinkable, but to stand together as one. Tune into Sunnahfollowers, streaming every day, various platforms. Trust me, you'll find a way. Sunnahfollowers.
She was an early convert to Islam. A warrior, a true warrior of Islam. She was the sister of the Dark Knight. And she accompanied Khawla Bint Walid in spreading Islam throughout the world. Join Ustada lailanasheeba as she details the story of a true warrior of Islam, Khawla. Sorry. In alhamdulillah, wa salam ala wa rasulullah. Welcome to our series entitled The Heroines of Islam. And this is the series in which I am take you on a journey to try to familiarize the women here with the female companions. And also the reason why I've taught this class is to also uplift your understanding of the role of women in Islam, because we're living in the days of fitan. We're living in the days where Muslim women have taken on the behavior and attitudes of the non-Muslim women. And Muslim women are claiming to want feminism, or to be feminists and all of this, when there is no reason for that. Because Islam is not an oppressive way of life. The female companions were not oppressed. The female companions were not made to be invisible. The female companions were women just like you and me. They had feelings, they had emotions. They were seen publicly. They were right there with the men, paving the road for the rest of this nation. And I really hope you sisters see that. You know, you realize that Muslim women have always had a voice. Allah has given us that. Muslim women participated on the battlefield. Muslim women participated, you know, in the mosque. Muslim women participated in the homes. So this misconception that the 2024 women have in this era is really bad, because it shows how uneducated we are as to the female companions. These women worked. These women paved the way. They worked to pave the way. And these women will be in paradise right alongside with the men. Now, tonight's story that I'm going to give you is one of my favorite heroines of all. In fact, I love this female companion so much that I've tried to get people close to me to name their daughters after her, and none of them would. I couldn't get none of my relatives or close friends to name their daughter this name. I don't know why. Maybe because if they knew of her, they would. I don't know. They just would never name their daughters after her. But if I had another daughter, I would have named her this. And the story, this woman's story, her name is Khawla. Khawla. She was one of the female companions, but she was a warrior. She was a warrior, a true bred warrior, just like Hani, just like Maymuna, just like Salama. To be honest, just like all the female companions were. Because as I tell you guys over and over, the Prophet Muhammad came around in the 6th century. Back in that era, women were viewed as nothing but chattel before Islam. Islam gave women rights they never had before. Islam abolished the bearing of a female daughter. If a woman gave birth to a daughter, they would bury her. They would only allow a certain amount of the females to live to keep the population going. And even then, the ones that they did allow to live, they trained them. Those girls were trained to fight because it was the dark ages. It was a terrible existence for women. If a girl was not trained to fight and care and protect herself, she would end up a casualty of war. She would end up collateral. She would end up prostituted. She would end up a slave or whatnot. If her husband died, she became the property of his brother, of his father, and they could do what they want with her. So these were terrible times. And the Arab women were no different than the Vikings and the Romans. The girls that were allowed to live were trained in warfare as well. And for those that could not catch on to war tactics, they were trained in magic. I mean, not magic, what you call it? Poison. Yeah, they were trained in poison, how to make poison. So as if something, the women would carry it in their pocket with them, carry it in their waistband in case that a war broke out or they became captive, rather than die without a struggle, they'd have that poison, in their pocket to lace the drink of the man with, or even in a lot of cultures, they took their own lives. The Greeks, the Romans, before Islam, even the Arabs, the women would take their own life rather than be raped or enslaved. So the women that were allowed to live in the 6th, 7th, 8th century, they were trained in warfare. They were trained to fight. And as I told you in other classes, they were partnered up. They were usually partnered up with a close relative, their brother or their cousin. As we discussed, Salama, she trained with Khalid bin Walid. That's why she was a master strategist. That's why she was a great warrior. She attended every battle as a counselor and advisor to the Prophet, and she would go out and fight if the need to fight emerged. And she was just as skilled as Khalid bin Walid was. He was the one that she sparred with. And then we talked about Maymuna, how Maymuna was partnered. And we talked about how Hani, how she was partnered. They all were partnered with a cousin, a brother, or someone to train with. Well, tonight's heroine, she was partnered with her brother. Her brother was known as the Dark Knight. After the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died and Abu Bakr became the caliph, as my cousin Mukhtar has taken you on that journey of Khalid bin Walid as the general of the army, this heroine fought with him. Okay. She was the sister of one of Khalid bin Walid's greatest fighters, one of his greatest generals. One of his greatest generals was Qaqa. We talked about him. Mukhtar talked about him. Well, there was another one that Mukhtar mentioned the other day, Dirar. Dirar was also another great fighter and great general of Khalid bin Walid's army. He was so great that the Romans named him the Dark Knight because he always wore black. His armor was black. And he'd always cover his face with a black veil. And he always rode on a black horse. So Dirar, he was one of the original companions, he was known as the Black Knight. Well, Dirar had a sister. Her name was Khawla. And she sparred with her brother. They were trained. She was just as great a fighter as he was. And I'm going to tell you guys, Khawla was so good that some of the companions said if there would have been a female equal to Khawla, it wouldn't have been Salama. She would have been second. Had there been a female equal to Khalid bin Walid on the battlefield, it would have been Khawla. Because Salama, even though she could fight too, she could wield a sword just like Khalid. But remember, she wasn't trained on the battlefield. She didn't fight. She only fought to protect her husband if the need was there. But after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, the wives of the Prophet didn't ride out on the battlefield like that anymore. So Khawla had more experience in that. And so we're going to do her story tonight. Many of you may not have heard of her. In fact, when I was putting the PowerPoint together for her story today, we were talking, one of the sisters said, well, maybe it's because nobody's heard of her, but that's not true. All Arabs know who she is. The Arabs in the Arabic world, Khawla is very well known. They have schools named after her. There are army, even battalions named after her. It's just that the Western world, which is no mystery, the converts, the Muslims in the West have never heard of her. But the Arabic world has heard of Khawla. You know, subhanAllah, I knew about Khawla when I was a child and always dreamed that I was her. And that's why I always keep her story for last. You know, I try to postpone her story because when I talk about her, her story touches me in the same way that talking about Aisha does. Aisha was my mentor and role model in intelligence. Okay. And I'm so much like her in my attitude, in my behavior. I got a flippant mouth like she had too. I inherit all that stuff from Aisha, but also Khawla. She's the other side of lailanasheeba, that lailanasheeba always wanted to be and dared to be. And I write books. I leave that part of me in my books that I write, my novels and stuff of me being like her. So I always save Khawla for last for that reason. So let me put the PowerPoint up on the screen, and I'm going to take you on a journey about this beautiful woman who even now it kind of makes me sad to even talk about her because it just does something to me. I feel a connection to her in a way because she's the other side of Layla that few people really know. I mean, they see the Aisha side a lot, but the warrior side, I am a warrior. And this is why I tell, you know, a lot of people don't get me. The kids do, but a lot of people don't get me, especially you Muslims here in the West. You're not used to a female daya that speaks as strongly as I do, because the women in the West don't speak this way. Okay. And it's not that I'm angry and it's not that I am shouting. That's not, you know, I'm loud. That's part of who I am. Arabic women are known as being loud. We are a loud people. Okay. And I'm strong. You know, that's the way I am. And I have a passion. It's called passion, not anger. I am not angry. When I get angry, you would know it because I would disappear. When I get angry or if something bothers me or upsets me, I go into a shell and nobody can find me. But I have a passion about me. And I get very passionate with this female companion because it's so much me that I want to be. It's the Layla that wants to let loose. It's the Layla that wants to live during that era. It's the Layla that needs to be set free, but she can't be set free. Okay, so let me share with you this favorite companion of mine. Let's put everything down. And by the way, take screenshots. Feel free to screenshot the PowerPoints. I'm getting ready to, oh, I forgot I was on Zoom too. And by the way, let me know if something happens, and because I get kind of melancholy with this story, because this female touches my heart. in a way that I can't even begin to explain. I can't even begin to explain it. But let me put this PowerPoint here. Let me make it large. Yeah, I see my Arabic sister here. She said, Layla, subhanallah. She said, I know you're doing Khawla. Yeah, see, like I say, Khawla is very well known in the Arabic world. And she's saying, you are Khawla. Yes, yes, I am. Wafat. Yeah, Wafat, she said, you're a mixture of both. You're a mixture of Aisha and Khawla. Yes, I am Khawla. All right, let's talk about it. Yeah, the Q&A show, huh? Okay, now Kim, get ready to share. The people on Zoom, you guys see the PowerPoint, right? Everybody on Facebook and YouTube should see. Okay, Sister Wefat, don't you make me cry there. She said, Layla, you are Khawla. She just keeps typing it over and over. Yep, she knows. She knows the story. Khawla is very popular with Arab women. Okay, her name is Khawla Bint Azwar. You sisters in the West are not familiar with her. But you see, I mentioned her name, and all the sisters in the Middle East, they get excited. And they say, yep, Layla's a Khawla. Khawla Bint, the daughter of Azwar. And this picture here that I've been using through this whole series, that's how I imagine my Khawla being. Because Khawla was a true warrior. Okay, and I imagine her looking like this, you know, dressed in her military stuff with her little face covered like that, with her tribal markings on, and her helmet to protect her from the blow, and her knife at the side. I imagine her being like that, you know, subhanallah. Let me share her story. Khawla. She was an Arab Muslim warrior. And when you read about her in Encyclopedia Britannica, she's mentioned in all the encyclopedias. They say that she was a Muslim warrior in the service of the Rashidun. Okay, the Caliphate of Abu Bakr. She served in the Caliphate of Abu Bakr. When you hear Rashidun, they're speaking about Abu Bakr and Umar's Caliphate. And history, like I said, she's very well known historically. She played a major role in the conquest of Levant. And she fought side by side with her brother Dirar. And even the non-Muslims have described her as one of the greatest female soldiers in history, even greater than Nusayba. Even the non-Muslims know who she is, the ones who have degrees in history. When you go to school and get a degree in ancient civilizations like I have, you learn even more about her because she's mentioned all in the Roman books because she was with the Rashidun and fought against the Romans and the Persians and all of that. And also, guys, she was a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she will be amongst those 70,000 who will enter paradise without being held accountable. When was she born? Like I told you, the Islam came about in the 6th century. She was born sometime in the 7th century. She was the daughter of Azwar el-Asadi, who was one of the leaders of the Asad tribe. And by the way, there's a lot of descendants. Wafat, we know, right? Asadi. When you hear come upon Arabs with that Asadi name, there's a lot of them still around. Okay, she was the daughter of Azwar el-Asadi, one of the chiefs of the Asad tribe. And Khawla was well known for her bravery. And again, like I tell you, back in the 6th, 7th century, the females that were allowed to live, they were trained. I don't make this stuff up. I have a degree in ancient civilizations, and my stuff can be verified, the things I tell you, not only through the hadiths, but also through Britannica and all of that crap too. Okay, her brother was the man named Dirar, and he was known as the Dark Knight, Maybe one day I'll do his story, because Dirar is not mentioned enough. He's mentioned a lot in the Arabic countries, but the Western world, you guys need to learn about him. He was a great warrior like Khawla, okay? Well, she fought side by side with her brother in many battles, including the battle at Mukhtar. In fact, Mukhtar mentioned his name to you all when Mukhtar talked about him last week. He fought and she fought too during the Battle of Yarmouk against the Romans. That was one of the first battles at that Abu Bakr and them fought against the Byzantine, the Romans. Byzantines are the Romans. Well, she fought with her brother in that battle. And on the fourth day of that battle, she was the woman who led a group of other women against the Roman army, and they defeated its chief commander. And later she was later wounded during her fight with a Greek soldier. So Khawla was a stone warrior. And let me tell you guys something. She was virgin. In fact, I don't know if she ever married. I don't think she ever married. In fact, me and Wafad was talking about it earlier. There's nothing written. I don't think she ever married. Okay. I think she was killed. She ended up, being martyred before she was even able to get married. She was a virgin girl, trained with that sword with her brother, the Dark Knight. Okay. Now, let me talk a little bit about her background. Her father, as I said, was Azwar, who was a major leader of the Asad tribe. Her brother Dirar became Muslim after the Battle of the Trench, and Mukhtar talked about him. When Mukhtar did the story, the Prophet Muhammad, he mentioned his name before. Well, he became Muslim after the Battle of the Trench, and her family were one of the early converts to Islam, because she was Muslim before her brother. Okay. Her family were one of the early converts. But Dirar, it took a little time for him to convert. And he was a highly skilled warrior. And being such, he taught his sister Khawla everything he knew about fighting. Why? Because like I told you, back in the 6th and 7th century, the girls had to learn to fight in order to survive. Otherwise, they would become a casualty of war, a collateral, or a slave, or raped, a bedmate. Dirar was attached to his sister. He loved his little sister, so he taught her everything he knew, how to use the sword, how to use the spear. And by the way, Khawla was also trained in martial arts. She was also trained in martial arts. Okay? True warrior. When you hear Muslims say that women didn't participate on the battlefield, I keep telling y'all that's not true. Even in Bukhari and Muslim, you will find that Muslim women participated. I don't know where these brothers get their information from, but they're not getting it from the authentic hadiths. I think it's a conspiracy to try to break women down to dirt again or something. I don't know. But Khawla was a true warrior, and she learned everything from her brother, just as Salama learned from Khawla bin Walid. Okay, the women had their spar people to teach them. Now, her first talent appeared during the Battle of El Uqaq in 634. And you can find this in any Kaffir book, any Kaffir History Britannica, because I studied her when I was in college. I did a paper on her. Her talent first appeared during the Battle of El Uqaq in 634, which was fought during the siege of Damascus. And Mukhtar spoke about that, how during the caliphate of Abu Bakr, Islam spread through Syria. Mukhtar was speaking about the siege of Damascus. Well, during this siege, her brother, Dirar, he led one of the contingent Muslim forces, and he became wounded. and he was taken a prisoner by the Romans. And Khalid bin Walid took his mobile guard to rescue him. Khawla accompanied the army, and she rushed the Roman rear guard by herself, dressed in her armor and typical loose dress. Now I'm gonna tell y'all, how did the Arab women dress on the battlefield? Just like you see here, except she had on armor, and they had loose dress, which consisted of harem pants. So for these men that tell you that women can't wear pants, I don't know where they get that from, because Arab women were always wearing pants. They wore harem pants, and I have another picture after this that'll show you how they look. But dressed in her armor and typical loose dress of Arabian warriors, they didn't know that she was a woman until Khalid asked who she was. Okay, and I'm going to talk in detail about that in a minute. Also, during the Battle of Ajnadin, Mukhtar spoke about this the other day. During the Battle of Ajnadin, Khawla accompanied the Muslim army there to give medical attention. Now, this is where I think the uneducated Muslim famous speakers get lost. These brothers that go to school and learn Quran, but they don't learn Hadith. This is where I think they get it twisted. Because even though the Arabic women were trained to fight, and they used to fight before Islam, after Islam, the Prophet told the women not to fight unless they had no. Muhammad's aunt Safiya, remember when they did the Battle of the Trench? And Safiya wanted to fight. She wanted to get out there and fight because she was a trained warrior. And she was trained by her brother Hamza. Remember her? Safiya was Hamza's sister. She said, I'm not no woman that stay in the house. I need to get out here and help you, Muhammad. Remember, he said, Islam, it's our job to protect the women now. That's when Allah sent down the different rights of women and roles of men. So he made Safiya stay in the tower. But remember, the man that he placed as guard, Hassan Thabit, wasn't man enough to take out the Jews. It ended up being Safiya cutting off their heads, throwing it out the window. Okay, so, you know, what happened was, and I think these brothers don't know this because they don't know the Hadith, you know, which is the history of Islam. After Islam, the Prophet told the women, instead of fighting with us, come on the battlefield and take care of the wounded. So all the women that could fight would go out there to take care of the wounded. Khawla, Safiya, okay, Hakam. Remember we talked about her? Hakam. They were all trained warriors. Maymuna, they could fight. But their original thing was to look after the sick. But when the women saw, and this became an advantage for the Muslim, for the Arabs, because no one knew that these Arab women could fight this well. I mean, the Roman women knew how to fight too, but not like these Arab women. So they would always surprise their enemies too. The women would be out there taking care of the sick, but when the battle would change, when it looked like the men were losing the upper hand, the women would pick up their poles, drop their water bottles, and run out there and do jihad, and they could fight just as good as the men. That's how the Muslims were victorious in many of their battles against the Romans, because they didn't expect this from Arab women. Okay? They expected it from the Vikings. Up to this point, before the Arab women, the women that were known as being the most ferocious fighters were Viking women. Well, the Arab women shocked the world. Okay? So anyway, in the Battle of Ajnadin, Khawla was with the Muslim army, and she was on the battlefield with a few other women. Hakam was one too, and they were providing medical attention to the wounded soldiers. But when she realized that her brother was captured by the Romans, Khawla threw her water bottle down and she pulled on her knight's armor, her weapons, and she grabbed her horse and she wrapped herself in a green shawl. And she fought against the Roman battalion who were attacking the Muslims. And y'all look at the name here. Y'all remember this name from today's lecture with Mukhtar. One of the commanders of the army, Shurabil. Didn't Mukhtar mention his name today? Mina, do y'all remember this name from today's lecture? One of the generals of the Muslim army, Shurabil ibn Hassana. Listen to what he said about Khawla. When he saw Khawla out there wielding her sword, taking off the head just as good as a man, he said, this warrior, he said, whoever that person is, because he couldn't tell if it was a woman or a man, because the way they dressed, because the men wore loose garments too. So you couldn't tell if they were male or female unless you got up close. He said, whoever that warrior is, that warrior fights like Khawla bin Walid. But I know it ain't Khalid. And the only other person that fights like that is Salam. And you know she ain't here. It was Khawla. And we have sources that claim in another battle, and I'm going to talk about that. Khawla was captured after falling off her donkey. And she was taken as a prisoner with some other Muslim women. Hakam and Hani were there too. And the Romans were going to rape them, but Khawla and Hakam stopped that from happening. In fact, Khawla killed 5 of those soldiers. But I'm going to go into the details about these battles now. And these battles are not just in the authentic hadiths, mainly Muwatta, but you can also find these battles in any Britannia history book. Like I said, only the Western world hasn't heard of Khawla. Okay? Let's take you there. It was during the Caliphate of Abu Bakr. As you all know, Abu Bakr had appointed Khalid bin Walid as the general of the Muslim army. As Mukhtar spoke about today and the other day, this is when the Muslims were spreading Islam through Syria. Khalid bin Walid was leading the army to take Damascus. And the Muslim army occupied the outskirts of Damascus. Damascus was heavily guarded, and the Muslim army was too small to press the siege of a city like that. And remember, this happened after the Muslims had fought and after the defeat of Busra, which Mukhtar talked about. So anyway, and by the way, who was the Roman leader at the time? I don't know if Mukhtar told y'all. The Roman leader at that time was Heraclius. That's why this is in all history books. Heraclius was the Caesar. He was the Caesar of the Roman Empire. Heraclius was Christian. And this is probably how they dressed. I did an A1 of how I did 7th century Heraclius army, and this is how they dressed. The Romans wore a cross. They on their armor, like you see here. That's supposed to be a cross, because Heraclius was the Caesar of Rome, and he was Christian. They were trying to stop Islam from spreading. So Heraclius had garrisoned all the forts in Syria because he knew the Muslims were attacking. And he ordered a huge concentration of forces in the south at Ajnadin, which was west of Jerusalem. The Muslim scouts brought back the news that the Roman army was over 100,000 strong, and that they were all in Ajnadin. This set Khalid bin Walid thinking. He said, if I press the siege against Damascus, the danger will be that the Roman army from Ajnadin might attack the Muslims from the rear. And in that case, the position. And when Khalid thought this, he remembered the Battle of Uhud. Remember the Battle of Uhud? One of the kids asked, how is it that Khalid bin Walid had that knowledge? Oh God, he just was brilliant. That's how he was able to make the Muslims not succeed like they wanted to at Uhud, because he attacked them from the rear. So remembering that, that's what Khalid said, no, I can't go into Damascus, because they'll be able to do to me what I did to the Prophet's army in the beginning before I was Muslim. So Khalid changed his strategy, and he decided to deal with the Ajnadin forces in the first instance. So in place of this, the siege of Damascus was lifted. Army was ordered to go to Ajnadin. And when the siege of Damascus was lifted by the Muslims, that made the Romans think, wow, we got them now. And they had an army of 6,000 horses, 10,000 foot soldiers. And they fell upon the Muslim rear guard as they were retreating. And the attack that Heraclius's men made was so great that the Romans captured a number of women who were in the camp. Amongst the women that were taken as captures was Hakim. Oh, let me get to that. Hold on. The Muslim women captured by the Romans were kept in a separate camp. And among the women prisoners was Khawla, the sister of Zarar. First of all, remember, she was on the battlefield with the other women providing water. They didn't fight unless they had to. The Romans didn't know that these women were trained better than they were. So amongst the prisoners was Khawla, Hakim, Hani, Layla. Remember I told y'all Layla's name would come up again. Who was Layla? Layla was one of the wives of Khalid bin Walid. He married her. So they were all taken as prisoners. Hakim, Hani, Layla, and guess who else? Atika, the beautiful damsel Atika. They were all part of the captives of war. Now, the commander of this contingent sent by Heraclius, his name was Peter. Peter is the name written in history of this man. He was one of the best generals of Heraclius. He was the commander of this contingent. And when the women were brought out, Khawla, his eyes went right to her because she was just so beautiful, so magnificent. He's told the men, I want her for me. Now, remember, we talked about how back in the 6th, 7th, 8th century, the women were collateral. If ever a battle was fought, the women became captives of war. And as a captive of war, the men would make them their bed slaves. The Muslim men did it, and the Muslims would make them their right-hand possessions. In Islam, a man can have as many right-hand possessions as he wants. And it's not like how the non-Muslim men did. The non-Muslim men would rape these women and make them slaves. No, the Muslim men had to provide and maintain these women and care for them, just as if they were their wives. It's just that they didn't have to give them set nights. Okay? The Muslim women knew what would happen to them. They said, wait a minute, these people are kafir. We're now prisoners. These men are going to rape us. So when Peter had the men put the women in a tent, some of the women were crying about their fate. But Khawla and Hakim, They said, no, 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 we ain't crying. That's when Hakam said, we are women of the tents. And then they said, well, what does that mean? And that's when Khawla said, as a woman of the tent, we know how to fight with poles. We're going to pull these poles up out the ground and we're going to bash their heads open. When these kafirs come to us to rape us, we're going to bash their heads open. So the Arab women stopped crying and they began to wiggle around and they pulled the poles out. And when the Romans entered the tent to rape them, the women started fighting, just like in this picture. They went crazy with those poles. Peter, who was the commander, bagged up. He was shocked. They never seen any women fight this way. Only Viking women were that barbaric in their mind. But these Arabic women, they considered Arab people to be ignorant. They thought they were just people of the desert. They're uneducated. They can't read. They can't write. They're just ignorant people from the desert. So imagine how shocked these Roman men were to see these women. Hani, one of the best. Hakam, another warrior. And here we got Khawla taking off heads. Peter stood from a distance and he yelled out to Khawla. He said, hey, surrender. And I promise you that not only will you be safe, he said, but I've never seen a woman like you. He said, I will make you the queen of my heart. They say Khawla yelled back at him. She said, you Roman dog, how dare you think you could have a Muslim virgin? She said, I am a virgin. I will die fighting than allow you the honor of one touch of me. And that's when Peter got angry and told his men to get the women. And so that's when the battle began and the women were fighting. And the Romans were shocked because they did not expect this from these beautiful, look how they're dressed, loosely dressed Arabic women. Well, it just so happens while this was going on, Khawla bin Walid, he heard how when he had retreated, the Romans got the Muslims from the rear. So he rushed back because he remembered, wait a minute, where's Layla? My wife was back there, you know? So he had his men turn around to go back. And Khalid, when he arrived, Allah planned it so well, guys. This shows how Allah is always in control. When Khalid and his army arrived, it was right when the women were fighting for their lives. When Khalid saw what was happening, him and his men rode up on the scene. And not only were the Romans routed, but they were massacred. Out of 6,000 Roman horsemen, only 100, and this is in history. This is what makes Khalid so great and the Muslim army. There were 6,000 Roman horsemen. That little small contingent of Khawla bin Walid killed them all. Only 100 escaped to tell the story and make history. And it just so happened when Peter and his men were stepping forward to overpower the Muslim women, Khalid and Zurar, they were the first warriors to arrive and help. When Zurar saw his sister Khawla fighting against the leader, Peter, Zurar intercepted. And when Peter saw him, he said, oh, she's your sister? He said, I will make you a present of her. And Zurar said, guess what? I accept the present. And then he attacked him with his spear. Now, Zurar was the Dark Knight. He always rode on a black horse. His armor was black. And this is what I Googled. I did a AI Google generation of Heraclius, the Romans, and Arab, and the Black Knight. Because Gerard is known as the Black Knight. So I typed the Black Arabian Arab Knight Gerard, and this picture came up. So this is probably how he looked. But, you know, he always rode a black steed. He had the black plume on his helmet. Okay, so Gerard charged upon Peter and gave him the point of his spear. And then Gerard cut off his head and he impaled it on his lance. So that means not only did he cut off Peter's head, but he put it on top of his sword and held it up in the air. So all the other Romans could see that he defeated their general, their leader. Okay. Now, the siege of Damascus began on the 21st of August in 634. Now, as Mukhtar, and I'm probably getting ahead of y'all on the Mukhtars, because Mukhtar's doing the Caliphate of Abu Bakr. He told you guys are almost at the end. Well, guess what? As the siege of Damascus happened, Abu Bakr died. Abu Bakr died on the 23rd. He died 2 days after the siege of Damascus. And when Abu Bakr died, that's when Umar became the caliph. Although the army in Syria didn't know of this change. So remember, they didn't have telephones back then. Khawla bin Walid and his men, and even the women that were there, you know, they did not know that Abu Bakr had died. So they continued on with the orders that Abu Bakr had given them. Okay. And that's what Mukhtar was speaking about when he said that Khalid sent a detachment to take up its position at Beit Leah, which was 10 miles from Damascus. Well, it wasn't until the 9th of September. That shows how it took a month for the news to get to him. It wasn't until the 9th of September that Khalid bin Walid received news that a large Roman army was marching from Emesa and would reach Damascus within a couple of days. So Khalid organized a force of 5,000 men, and he put Zurara, who was Khawla's brother, again, the Black Knight, in charge of that. And he was told to intercept the Roman army at Beit Leah. And when they reached Beit Leah, Zurara organized an ambush near the pass of what's known as the Eagle. And when the Romans reached that pass, Zurara ordered an attack. The Romans were prepared and they deployed themselves in battle formation immediately. And many of the Romans were killed, and the ones that were not killed ran away. But the Romans captured Zurara, and they were told to keep him alive. And so when the Muslim army found out that their greatest hero, the Black Knight, was taken as a prisoner, you know, they became very, very depressed. And that's when, and you heard Mukhtar mention his name, that's when the command was given to Rafi. And Rafi took over the Muslim army and sent word to Khalid for help, because Zurara was taken as a prisoner of war. Wait a minute, hold on, let me go back. Okay. So leaving the command of Damascus to Abu Ubaidah, Khalid bin Walid set off with his army of 4,000 horsemen. And as Khalid was approaching the battlefield, he saw a Muslim rider, a man on a horse with a mask over his face, running off towards the Roman front. This man would kill several soldiers and then run away. And he would come out again and pounce on more, kill more, and run away. Khalid watched this soldier from a distance. He said, "Who is this man?" And the last time the warrior made an attack, that's when Khalid went to the warrior and said, "Stop. Who are you?" And that's when the warrior said, "I am Khawla. I am the sister of Zarar. My brother has been captured by the Romans, and I am dashing against the enemy to free him." Now, what happened was here, when Khawla heard that her brother was taken as a prisoner of war, she didn't ask no questions. She immediately put on her armor. She jumped on her horse, took her arrows, her bow, her swords, her spears, and she went out to get her brother and bring him back. She was his little sister. They ain't taking my brother. And again, the way the Arabs dressed back then on the battlefield, they had their faces covered. The men would cover their face, and so would the women, because it protects against the sand too. Okay? So Khalid didn't know if that was a woman or a man. He thought it was a man fighting like that. So imagine how shocked he was to find out it was Khawla. And so Khalid praised her for her bravery. And he told her, "Come with me. We will go together and free your brother." And that's when Khalid launched the attack against the Romans with full force. And as they were going after the Romans, they heard that 100 soldiers were seen riding on horses close to the town of Emesa, and they were dragging a half-naked man. They had a half-naked man tied to his horse, and they were dragging him along. Now, everybody knew that that was Gerard, because when they said the horse was black, Khawla and Khalid knew that ain't nobody but Gerard. Half naked means they took off his armor. They had his shirt. He didn't have no shirt on. His hands were tied. And they were dragging him on by his horse, you know, to the probably back to wherever Heraclius was. So that's when Khalid ordered Rafi. He said, "Take 100 horsemen and move forward and intercept the Romans and get Zarar back." And of course, Khawla accompanied them. Rafi and his men got to Emesa, and they waited for the Romans to approach. And when the Romans approached, that's when the Muslims fell upon them and killed most all of them. And Khawla was the one who set her brother Zarar free. And it was later, it was after this that Khawla bin Walid heard that Umar had died. That shows how long it took to get messages across, over a month. It wasn't until a month after, Abu Bakr had died that that Khawla bin Walid heard. And when he learned that Umar was the caliph, Umar had also told him to come back home to Medina. So not only did Khawla bin Walid go back to Medina, but also Darar went back, and Khawla and all the rest of them. And when they arrived in Medina, Umar, radiallahu anha, praised Khawla for her fighting skills. And that's where her story ends, unfortunately, guys. Unfortunately, we don't know if she ever married. There's nothing else about her. We don't know what else happened with her. You know, I don't know. I used to dream when I was a kid that maybe Umar married her. I didn't know, but I don't know. There's nothing else written. But she's in all the history books. She's in all the Britannica books. And today, like I said, her name, Khawla, is well known. There are many streets and schools in Saudi Arabia that have her name, Khawla. They're named after her. Also, the country of Jordan Jordan has a stamp in her honor as part of the Arab women in history. Also in the Middle East, many Arab cities have schools and institutions that carry her name, Khawla Bint Azwar. And also, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, there's an all Iraqi women's military unit that's called the Khawla Bint Azwar unit. But I say unfortunately because these women do not wear hijab. And it's really sad. If you Google the Iraqi all women military unit, they disgrace Khawla because those women look like Kafir women dressed in their Kafir fatigues with no hijabs on. You can't even tell they Muslim. Khawla fought for Islam. She fought to establish the hijab, to establish the abaya, to establish the fact that we women are equal to men spiritually. Also in the UAE, that's where I got a lot of my information from Sister Wafat too. In the United Arab Emirates, the first military college for women is established, Khawla Bint Azwar Training College. That's where women go to be trained. And those women do dress right. If you Google them, they do wear black and they wear hijabs and stuff. Nice looking women. They look pretty sharp. People talk about the Emirates, but at least their military women are dressed sunnah. Okay? So that's the story of Khawla. She's my favorite companion, and I always end my series with her because she's that other side of Layla. She's that side that cannot be tamed down. Nobody knows if she got married. I don't think she ever did. You know, how could she get married when she was too busy with the dawah? Just like Layla, busy with the dawah, busy trying to establish la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, busy trying to keep the sunnah alive, busy trying to be a protector of the sunnah, busy trying to call the people to the companions, the originals, and not imams. This is the other Layla. We live in this world alone, misunderstood. But subhanAllah, one day we'll be united with those who do understand us. Inshallah. So that's the story of Khawla. Any questions or